Hey nudists, it's everybody's favorite dude named Nick Bate. Nick Bate. Where am I, you may ask? Right here. Under the table.
What could be worse than the Mr. Evil Guy?
Me is worst,
Said the Mr. Super Evil Guy. Little did he know about Larry.
Hey nudists, it's everybody's favorite dude named Nick Bate. Nick Bate. Where am I, you may ask? Right here. Under the table.
He popped up on the internet like a sewer rat and quickly became public enemy number one, Nick Bates, a name no one should ever be associated with.
Here's me, doing my infamous booby dance.
Nick possesses so many disgusting qualities. He's a self-acclaimed child rapist. He creates blogs and dedicates them to the victims he stalks. He documents his obsession and disgusting sexual fantasies on social media. Vaginas are awful. Do you think Anna will let me watch her poop? I want to see it so bad. I'm not a rapist yet and I'm loyal to Anna anyway. I just want to play games, watch stuff, mall walk, etc. He's a cross-dresser, a neo-Nazi. Not to mention he has a very revolting personal hygiene. Nick Bates takes pride in not brushing his teeth for decades and smearing poo on his walls, and he advocates for the legalization of pedophilia.
I want to watch your heart sister. Please. You want to watch her use poison. You're saying that there's nothing wrong with it.
This man ticks all the boxes of degeneracy you never thought was humanly possible. And you know what makes his case extremely nauseating? He's been around on the internet since 2004, and his rise to infamy lasted till 2015. That's more than a decade of pure internet repulsion. Nick's behavior is so terrible it even landed him in prison. The reason? He did unspeakable things to his own sister. Nick Bates is one of the most hated lolcows out there. He makes horror cows like Chris Chan look like good people, and that's saying something. In case you've been living on the healthy side of the internet, this is a reminder that you're about to learn about the most disgusting man online. Nick Bates' story is complex and somewhat triggering. We're talking years and years of unsettling behavior displayed by a real person in real life.
There's a toilet. There's a plunger that I use as a butt plug. There's a mirror. This is usually where I take pictures of myself.
It's a pretty disturbing topic. So be prepared for the roller coaster of shock, disgust, and frustration you're about to witness as you unfortunately learn about the man called Nick Bates. The story begins with a simple name, Anna, a young woman who was unfortunate to catch Nick Bates' attention. Nick, born Nicolaus Boyd Stautzenberger on September 1st, 1991, met her when he was 13 and Anna was 12. Not long after their meeting, things spiraled out of control quicker than a noodle slipping through chopsticks. According to the Encyclopedia Dramatica, which is basically the Wikipedia for lolcows or the wiki of internet shame, Anna was, in a way, an eccentric lady herself. Word on the street was that she was a self-diagnosed mentally ill person with Asperger's syndrome, which, according to Wikipedia, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by significant difficulties in social interaction and nonverbal communication. Loosely translated, Asperger's is within the same spectrum as autism, and it's really not something a non-medical professional could self-diagnose and claim out in the open. But Anna was just a 12-year-old kid with other bizarre interests. The Encyclopedia Dramatica, or let's just call it ED going forward, highlighted some of these interests. One of them was her love for anime and cosplaying. Anna was a weeaboo at heart, not to be confused with weebs, who are normal anime lovers. By extension, weeaboos are non-Japanese people who obsess over or fetishize Japanese culture. They go as far as disregarding their own culture to suck up to that of the Japanese. Yeah, that's who Anna was, as described on Nick's ED page. But like we said earlier, she was 12. Some kids that age could do all sorts. Well, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, beyond that questionable detail, Anna, it seemed, had a habit of seeking out basement dwellers and having the S word with them online. Seek out basement dwellers on various sites and man, that's crazy. This is why parents need to reduce screen time for their kids. They've been wild since the early 2000s. From this rather unsettling piece of information, we discovered that Nick was one of those basement dwellers whom Anna engaged in such online activity. That's a tough pill to swallow. Nick Bates was drawn to everything Anna loved and believed in. He even became a fan of her favorite band, They Might Be Giants, which was formed in 1982 by John Flansburgh and John Linnell. Unfortunately, in the months following their first meeting, Nick quickly became obsessed and somewhat comfortable. Almost too comfortable, if I must say, because he decided to make the confession of a lifetime. And no, it's not a love confession. In hindsight, that would have been way better. The confession came in the form of a chat log, which was leaked in 2011. It revealed a conversation so disturbing that they're difficult to even discuss. First of all, Nick admitted that he was a and as if that wasn't bad enough, he went on to discuss some inappropriate activities involving a which happened to be his half-sister. From their conversation, Nick revealed that he had licked his half-sister's butt, which by the way was not properly wiped, and he even expressed a huge sense of disappointment for not getting his filling from the event. Anna was obviously shocked. I mean, who wouldn't be? This was someone she trusted as a friend, someone she vibed with, and here he was, owning up to one of the world's most horrific crimes. What's worse? It didn't end there. Nick also stated that his young half-sister had forced him to do it, and here's how his sister forced him. These weren't just weird or cringy conversations. They were evidence of serious criminal behavior and predatory attitudes toward children. The logs revealed a person who was not just socially maladjusted, but genuinely dangerous. This was why Anna wanted to put distance between them, even if their connection was only internet-based. Unfortunately, Nick was not on the same page. In fact, his love for Anna grew deeper and deeper by the day, and when the obsession became unbearable, she turned to her blog on LiveJournal, and constantly reiterated her disgust for Nick. "I hate you, Nick." You can hear the anger and frustration behind every word. It was that disturbing. Anna only wanted her peace, a life without Nick Bates in it, and she never hesitated to make her wishes known on her blog. "I'll never be your friend again, much less your girlfriend or wife. Now leave me alone." You'd think a normal human being would get the message. Sadly, Nick Bates, as we're going to discover shortly, was no average person. Instead of giving the poor girl her space, Nick dedicated his own online journal to foster discussions about Anna and respond to her hateful messages. Look at what he had to say to her previous message. Ignore the obvious misspelling. It's 100% deliberate. Why? We'll get into that in a bit. Back to the blog wars, Nick completely disregarded Anna's feelings and chose insanity over reason. His next response will leave you stunned. Nick said, "No, not until things are back to normal. Preferably better than normal, actually. I can keep doing this for as long as it takes." Imagine a madman pledging to make your life a living hell. Mind you, Nick's definition of normal was not the same as what we see in the dictionary. No, it's something much deeper, something highly disgusting. What kind of relationship did Nick Bates and Anna have? What more did this creep have up his sleeves if this obsessive behavior was only the beginning? Well, let's dive in, shall we? For context, Nick Bates is a horror cow. Don't know what that is? Let me break it down to you. If you're familiar with lolcows, aka weird people who can be milked for laughs on the internet, horror cows are the worst species in the group. The likes of lolcows like Pamperchew and Leslie Clark don't sum up to them. Horror cows are lolcows who are extremely disgusting and creepy. Horror cow. A lolcow that is primarily known for their disgusting and or creepy behavior. Horror cows may typically be known for one or multiple of the following: zoophilia, necrophilia, coprophilia, exceptionally violent behavior, excessive attention-seeking displays, and or other disgusting, creepy, and or horrifying behaviors. Their lives could essentially circle disturbing topics like crimes against children, violence, and other excessive attention-seeking behavior that would leave you unsettled and utterly sick in your stomach. For Nick Bates, the term takes a disturbing turn. He made his online debut in 2004 when he was just 12 years old, using the username Hagurumon, named after a Digimon character. Much of what is known about him is derived primarily from the Wikipedia page he created, and his two blogs. The first he created that same year, and the second which he created on LiveJournal in 2007. Nick named it Tales of the Nick. Would you get a load of this guy? In his bio last updated in 2013, Nick introduced himself as a random pervy guy. As if that was not sick enough, he went all out, highlighting his negative traits. I have my negative traits too, including being technically mentally retarded, antisocial, physically handicapped in so many ways, ugly, lacking any skills at all, and I'm sure I suck for many other reasons I can't remember right now. Frankly speaking, Nick Bates might be good at one thing, and that's recognizing how insane a human being he truly is. His introduction doesn't end there, however. Nick Bates revealed his rather lonely life as a homebody. "I have no local friends, so most of my time is spent playing video games or surfing the internet, where I have a few long-distance friends.
Pretty much just my entire life is like just kind of hanging out in my room, waiting for
He does seem pitiful, if you only consider that single sentence in his entire description. But again, it's Nick Bates. There's never room for pity here, especially after this next detail in his bio. Nick Bates talked about his habit of saying a boot instead of about to sound more Canadian. Nick typically typed in a fake Canadian accent online. Nobody knows why. He just decided he wanted to seem Canadian, so he'd throw in random ehs and other stereotypical Canadian speech patterns. It's the kind of random, pointless deception that makes you realize this guy's relationship with reality was already pretty weak. But on what planet is that considered normal? If anything, it's insulting to the small group of Canadians who speak in that manner. A small search on the internet revealed that this pronunciation is stereotypical. What's more, it's one thing to claim you imitate the pronunciation, and it's another ballgame entirely to intentionally omit the letter U in every spelling to seem Canadian. Nick Bates truly knows how to put the ick in thick when it comes to his sense of reasoning. Moving forward, as sick as Nick Bates' bio is, it doesn't hold a candle to his list of interests. From his profile, we can see that Nick likes a range of stuff, from celebrities and normal cartoons like Digimon and Family Guy to highly disturbing intrigues like butts, nudism, and perviness. Geez, he really has his degeneracy in the bag. So we have just laid the foundation of Nick Bates' online presence, where he scattered bits and pieces of himself. His blogs, bewildering as they were, contained everything about his history. However, I do have to warn that everything still needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because with Nick Bates, it's hard to tell what's true and what's false. Nick had an... Yes, this guy wrote an at 17 in 2009 on his LiveJournal page. He truly was a guy with an inflated sense of self-importance. According to Nick's... His early years in life were a bit fuzzy. After reading through his story seemed less and less similar to that of the average kid. Nick was born in Pennsylvania. From the very beginning, he was what you might charitably call troubled, though that's putting it incredibly lightly. One of the first red flags that would define his entire existence was his absolutely horrific dental hygiene. And when I say horrific, I mean the kind of mouth situation that would make a medieval peasant look like they had good oral care. Nick claimed to be afraid of dentists because he was convinced they would slit his throat while he sat in the dentist's chair. This wasn't some childhood fear that he grew out of either. This paranoia followed him well into adulthood. This resulted in teeth that were constantly rotting and falling off, and would hurt even when he drank coffee.
Drink my coffee. Okay, it's hot. Ow.
Nick wasn't exactly a family person. His childhood was, by all accounts, a complete disaster. He described his family as terrible. He painted a picture of a childhood completely devoid of any meaningful human interaction. He was homeschooled. In his own words, he was a retard who was failing to keep up with his peers. 4th grade came, and I remained at a 3rd grade level, unable to learn anything new. I'm still there, actually. So needless to say, now I'm considered retarded. It's ironic because he had been labeled gifted early. The label was short-lived, however. By 4th grade, he fell behind and was moved to special education. But like before, Nick failed at keeping up with. Apart from struggling to understand multiplication and subtraction, Nick claimed he wasn't even a level-headed student at all. Plus, I got into the occasional fight or threw the occasional tantrum. Eventually, his mom pulled the plug on day school and switched to homeschooling. I mean, it's quite understandable. Better to save that money than waste it on a repeat offender airhead. Homeschooling meant virtually zero social interaction with people his own age. Yet Nick loved it. It gave him time to play games and avoid people. He made friends online. They played The Nick Team, a live-action roleplay riffing on Dragon Ball Z and Final Fantasy IX. It was paradise for Nick Bates. But what he didn't realize, or anyone for that matter, was that this isolation would prove to be absolutely catastrophic for his development as a human being. Nick's parents were divorced. On his Wikipedia page, it is explained that his father was a violent alcoholic, and this had been the direct cause of the separation. His father lived away, and his grandmother was literally his only sanctuary since he could play however he liked. Following his parents' split, Nick ended up living with his mother, whom he never had good things to say about. He spoke about her quite a lot, calling her evil, and often hinted at a bizarre habit of her having him arrested as a form of discipline. My mom, who got remarried, would have me arrested every few months. From these little details, we can collectively agree that Nick Bates was a handful at a very young age. Without any normal social awareness, he was gradually developing into something that can only be described as a complete social abomination. Speaking of social abominations, let's go back to his oral health. If you thought not visiting the dentist was the most viscerally disgusting aspect of Nick's existence, then I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Nick's hygiene habits were so revolting that they could become a form of psychological warfare against anyone who had to interact with him. Apart from his refusal to brush his teeth, Nick rarely bathed, and when he did, it wasn't really bathing at all. What's worse? Instead of keeping this nauseating detail to himself, Nick chose to disclose it to the internet, especially on his Twitter account. Here's one time he did that. I wonder if they have a cure for lack of daily living skills? Do you realize how many people torment me for not knowing how to shower? There, I faked a shower, threw some towels on the floor, wet my hair. Now shut up, Joyce. By the way, Joyce is his aunt. Nick was basically advertising his filthiness to the rest of the world. His tweets in regards to showering were always about how he was forced to do it and how he hated it. Sigh. I just took a shower Sunday and everyone's already on my case about getting another one. Leave me alone, people. Now Joyce is on me about getting a shower. I just brushed my teeth. Isn't that good enough? You just can't catch a break with this guy. His Twitter is currently banned due to, and it's not quite surprising, this kind of disturbing behavior. And many more we're about to uncover. Fortunately for internet sleuths, and unfortunately for people who would rather be spared from Nick Bate's unusual story, his tweets are still preserved in an online archive. Between March 2009, when he created it, and 2011, Nick described his bathing ritual in detail. He said, "I don't actually get in the tub. I keep my pants on and crouch down, leaned over the tub so that when I wash my hair, the water and shampoo drain into it. That's not bathing, that's barely even rinsing." But for Nick Bates, it's a genius invention he called pseudo-showering. In March 2010, when he finally got into YouTube, he quickly spread his gross hygiene to the internet. Nick posted a video titled "The Horrors of Nick's Teeth," where he showed off the absolutely disgusting state of his mouth. We're talking about teeth that look like they belong in a horror movie, blackened and decaying stumps that would make a meth addict's teeth look healthy by comparison. It's painful to watch. But we'll get into his YouTube era in a bit. Still on the topic of hygiene, Nick had always been public about his awful, unhealthy habits. He once described how he would have feces and semen caked on his body, and would refuse to wash it off until forced to by circumstances. Don't worry, this one was chocolate, but it does paint a picture. A very disgusting picture that happens to be one of Nick Bates' many fantasies. In one of his tweets, he expressed that he might be a coprophiliac. Now, if you don't know the meaning, and I mean, why should anyone even? A coprophiliac is someone with a marked interest in excrement, especially the use of feces or filth for excitement. Simply put, Nick derives pleasure from being exposed to fecal matter. His body tingles when his Winnie finds poo. In his own words, and I quote, "I'm actually not sure if I'm a coprophiliac or not. I experiment and visualize it sometimes, but the problem is I have a weak stomach, so most of the time it agitates my gag reflex. So I don't know." This wasn't just poor hygiene. This was a complete rejection of basic human cleanliness standards. Nick not only shared this, but also curated a defecation survey, which contained over 50 questions of how people handled poop. And that's not all. Just check out what more he had to say about his weird love for poop. In one of his tweets, Nick wrote, "I need to invent a tube that I stick both ends into me and wife's butts, so that when she poops it goes through the tube into my butt." This dear sane people of the internet hinted at some serious mental health issues. It's sickening the more you read, and it's even more revolting when you realize that Nick's horrible antics only grow progressively worse the more you hear about them. After talking about experimenting with poop, Nick also disclosed his habit of wiping his dirty hands on his wall. Yeah, back when I was using baby oil and Vaseline as lube, I couldn't get it to wash off my hands, water resistant. So I wipe my hands on walls, furniture, clothes, etc. But someone told me to use vegetable oil now, which is coming off easily. So my walls will probably remain clean now. I used a paper towel, water, and some sort of dish soap or something to clean the walls off, which didn't really work. It got the most of it, but there's still smudges and stuff. Gosh, this is getting mentally tasking. I'm sorry you had to hear that. But let's proceed. In addition to all the other points we just touched, Nick had always been vocal about his cross-dressing habits. On the internet right now, there are dozens of photos of Nick in women's wear. Like any normal family out there, Nick's family wasn't too accepting of the situation. In response, Nick always insulted them, calling them conservative. "I'm a cross-dresser and my entire family consists of conservative bigots." How he grew into such a twisted young fellow, still under the roof of his parents, is so alarming. Even more disturbing about his attitude was his tendency to become quite obsessive with just about anything and everything. Perhaps the only normal and somewhat good thing about him was his soft spot for cats. However, we can't say for sure. Moving forward, this is where things begin to get interesting. Looking back at his bio on his 2007 LiveJournal blog, there's an important section that we need to consider for the plot. This part, right after he talks about having few friends, Nick singled out one mysterious person who he claimed was hating him. Most notably would be a certain person who, for whatever reason, decided to start hating me back in August 2008. This person was none other than Anna, Nick Bates' biggest obsession. Buckle up, because Nick's story really begins to take shape. Like many socially disturbed individuals of his generation, Nick found his way to the internet, where he discovered Homestar Runner, an online flash animation series that was pretty popular in the early 2000s.
All right. What do you got for me, Coach Z?
Take a look there. I think she's looking pretty good.
I said consummate V's. Consummate.
It did have its perks, with many people still liking the show years later. Through this animation series, Nick found the Homestar Runner wiki, where he made his first online friends. His obsession with Homestar Runner eventually morphed into an obsession with a cartoon called Bonus Stage. This pattern of intense, unhealthy fixations would become a defining characteristic of Nick's personality. As stated in his 2009, yes, this guy wrote an at 17 on his LiveJournal page. Nick explained his obsessions in detail, crowning his love for Bonus Stage as the very beginning of this insane hobby. Nick said. I spread to other websites, eventually discovering Bonus Stage, the greatest cartoon ever made. My first obsession. Then he explained this whole pattern, which he often found himself repeating. From this point forward, I started cycling through random obsessions every few weeks, and for the duration of them, they became the center of my universe. Then, of course, I abruptly find a new obsession, and the cycle repeats itself. The guy literally could not engage with anything in a normal, healthy way. For Nick, obsessions were not passive fandom. They were rituals that replaced everyday social practice. Instead of learning how to converse at the school cafeteria, he learned how to create a fan wiki entry, how to mod a message board, and how to write that perfect roleplay piece. These were skills. They were social in a way, yet didn't map onto the expectations of the real world. During this time, Nick joined DeviantArt, a website used to share artwork that people created, where he also went by the name Haguramon, and created poorly drawn pictures of him and his friends for a comic he would call Coffee Crew. Nick would spread his disgusting self all over the place, drawing Coffee Crew comics, writing lists of characters and tracks, and keeping a catalog of the things that had possessed him. Nick cycled through intense fixations, Bonus Stage, the Homestar Runner universe, and even the band They Might Be Giants as it would come to be, with a feverish appetite. He made lists, wrote encyclopedias of details, only to abandon them for the next thing. It was while he was helping to create a Bonus Stage wiki, sometime in 2005, that Anna entered the picture. And from here, what followed was one of the most disturbing cases of online stalking and obsession you'll ever hear about. During this time, Nick was apparently racking up multiple e-girlfriends or internet girlfriends, but Anna remained his primary obsession. Anna was not an abstraction. She was the personification of the very idea of possibility for Nick. She introduced him to obsessions he would adopt like religions, cartoons, songs, niche wikis. In his Nick wrote, "It didn't take long for me to fall in love with Anna. For real this time, she was fine with this at first, and even said she might marry me. Unfortunately, I told her too late, as she got a boyfriend, but I continued talking to her any chance I got, waiting for her to reciprocate my love for her." Now let's pause here for a second. Nick was 13 years old when this started. Anna was also a Yet he started hinting at a mindset of not wanting to let her go, even though she was seemingly available for him. Boy, did that sound wrong on so many levels. What Nick was describing as love was highly debatable considering his preferences. Now get ready as we take a sneak peek into Nick's unholy intrigues. Nick's preferences were not just weird, they were actively concerning and would become a major part of his online infamy. So far, we've touched on his love for poop, but as crazy as this sounds, it's not even as bad as what we're about to discuss. Over the years since he met Anna, Nick always expressed an obsession with butts, while simultaneously expressing disgust with vaginas. He would literally tell people that he found vaginal gross and preferred because he hates vaginas. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. Nick also expressed that he wasn't attracted to the women past puberty because their vaginas open up, and he actually said he would prefer to sew up a woman's genitals if he could. This wasn't just weird fetish stuff. Nick Bates was more or less rejecting the normal human and combining it with some deeply misogynistic and disturbing attitudes toward women's bodies. The fact that he was expressing these views while having a younger sister set off alarm bells everywhere. Another thing about Nick, he's opposed to the concept of abortion. In one of his tweets he mentioned, again, abortion has nothing to do with the woman, it's about the fetus. Hard to believe that someone who would have been better off aborted back in 1991 making these bold claims. Note that all these entries were made in 2011 when Nick Bates had become an internet taboo. We'll go more in depth as the story progresses, considering there are a lot of timelines to unpack leading to that point. Aside from the obvious concerning beliefs, here's something that made Nick particularly terrifying as a human being. The guy projected his weird desires on Anna. In one entry he made online, he expressed a sick sense of hope that Anna never became intimate with anyone. He wrote, "No, I don't believe in that technical virginity. Any act MO causes your virginity to be gone. Oral, fingering, mutual fisting, tit-sucking, etc. So she can't do anything or she's ruined." What's even crazier, Nick went from sharing these kind of repulsive thoughts to actively documenting anything and everything about Anna. This was what made Nick particularly terrifying as a stalker. Nick saved every single conversation he had online, emailed the transcripts to himself, and then uploaded some of them to his own personal Wikipedia page. Yes, this psycho created his own Wikipedia page where he documented his interactions with people, including detailed information about his obsession targets. This personal Wikipedia was created in June 2007, and it became a shrine to his various fixations, particularly Anna. Here's a page he created dedicated to the things that pissed Anna off. Here's another one titled, "A List of Nick's Obsessions." He documented chat logs. This level of documentation was honestly chilling, especially when you realize what he was building, essentially a comprehensive record of his stalking activities that he was proud enough to make public. Alongside his Anna worship, Nick also had a rather controversial figure he believed was perfect. This person is Adolf Hitler. In one of his entries in 2007, he wrote about a game called Apples to Apples. The basic rule of the game was to match an image with a word. Here's Nick's account on the game. The object is to lay down a card from your hand that best matches the word on the card that the judge lays down, and the judge picks which one he/she likes best, and whoever laid it down wins. For example, today, one of the words was perfect, and I was a smartass and laid down Adolf Hitler. I like being a smartass like that. It's so much fun. It would be important to note that Nick was only 15 when he posted this revolting piece of information, and he also uploaded pictures of himself doing the Nazi salute. It was as if Nick was getting out of control. From the way his unhinged attitude kept worsening, and it quickly became apparent that Nick was not operating on the same wavelength as normal human beings. Nick identified as a devout Christian who believed his relationship with Anna was divinely ordained. In addition, Nick's dreams had been small and very specific: marry Anna, have children, and be the perfect house husband. This modest life goal was not, in his mind, unreasonable, but it was fragile, built from online exchanges, and a kind of social confidence he only trusted behind a keyboard. After years of increasingly creepy behavior, Anna finally reached her breaking point on August 23, 2008, a date that Nick remembers with crystal clarity because it's burned into his deranged little brain. This was the day Anna blocked Nick on every single platform and never unblocked him. He documented the event in detail for some reason. One day, August 23, 2008 to be exact, she finally had enough. I'm not sure what exactly triggered it, but she decided to block me forever. Anna was done. Finished. She wanted nothing more to do with this creep who had been harassing her for years. Nick had always been someone who treated his fixations as an artifact to be curated. He was drawn to structure and repetition, to systems you can and replay until they feel like muscle memory. That was why Anna mattered so much. She was part of the pattern. She introduced him to so many things, but now she blocked him. And not only that, but Anna also used her platforms, blogs, Twitter, whatever she had then, to tell a story. Nick is creepy. He should kill himself. Now, a normal person might take this as a hint. A normal person might realize that when someone blocks you everywhere, they don't want to talk to you. But Nick is not a normal person. Instead of backing off, the blocking only intensified his obsession. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. In his autobiography, Nick wrote about this day with the kind of self-pity that would make you want to reach through the screen and shake him. He said, "That wasn't the only area of my life that caused me great stress. On top of school and childhood, Anna started to gradually hate me more and more. I started out being like her best friend, but over time she began to yell at me and block me for a few days every time I told her I loved her." Now, before we get into the main point, he mentioned having suffered from childhood. Nick never actually pointed at any explicit case in the only his mother's habit of calling the cops on him whenever he responded strongly whenever she disciplined him. While there could still be a few questions raised, it didn't necessarily add to this plot Nick was trying to create. Why mention to the girl who wanted nothing to do with you? What reaction was he hoping to receive after disclosing such information? Let's not forget how he conveniently left out of the kind of creepy behavior that led to this blocking. Nick had taken things a bit too far. His behavior eventually forced Anna to migrate to a new and her most recent live journal in December 2008, and she would reveal this detail September of the following year. Her entry read, "Just so you know, I'm still alive. Last December, Nick's creepiness forced me to migrate to a new LJ. He has since found it, causing me to make it friends only." Basically, Anna disclosed that she had moved to a new account that was more or less reserved for a handful of friends, but somehow, Nick found it and continued to make her life a living hell. His obsession intensified by the day. He wrote stories, disgusting fictions about him and Anna. Between Anna blocking him and his eventual exposure to the wider internet, Nick wrote multiple lengthy fanfictions about marrying Anna. These weren't just romantic fantasies. They involved explicit content that was so disturbing that even reading summaries is difficult. And disgusting doesn't qualify this aspect of Nick's behavior. Nick, with his talent for writing, created a story called The Meadow, which basically consisted of rather disturbing descriptions of Anna defecating on his face. Seriously, when does this end? The fact that he was writing these about a real person who clearly rejected him made it even more disturbing. For the sake of our sanity, we will not be going into the other disturbing details of the story. But you see that Nick's approach to the situation was terribly concerning, and this insensitivity lasted for years after Anna had forgotten about his existence. For instance, in one of his Facebook posts in 2015, Nick shared a drawing of him and Anna getting married. The caption would throw you off immediately. It read, "I drew this accurate depiction of the future yesterday. In hindsight, I probably should have drawn her pregnant, but what are you going to do?" It gets sicker the more you realize how long had passed since Anna blocked him. This detail gives us an insight into how much of an unreasonable human being Nick Bates was. On August 14, 2009, Nick had made an awful revelation on his live journal. He had entered his room to discover that his family had disposed his women's clothing. The first thing I noticed was that, dude, my bag filled with women's clothes I had hidden in my closet was gone. Now, as shocking as his crash out over the situation was, what truly stood out in this blog was the revelation that followed. followed. Nick spoke of what he described as his Anna pillow. He wrote, "See, for the past few years, I've had this special pillow that I basically pretend is Anna and cuddle with, you know, just until I can cuddle with the real thing." Nick just made yet another unhinged confession. This was a pillow that he pretended was Anna and would cuddle with, role play with, and do voices for both him and her. He shared this information because his family threw out his old pillows and replaced them with new ones. Nick had a complete meltdown because they had disposed of his Anna pillow. As if I wasn't already distraught enough over not being able to cross-dress anymore, I later noticed that my pillows had been replaced. Now, this is extremely sickening. The fact that he was casually discussing cuddling with and role-playing with a pillow that he pretended was his stalking victim shows just how completely disconnected from reality Nick had become. This wasn't quirky or eccentric behavior. This was genuinely creepy for a 17-year-old. Nick's descent into internet degeneracy really accelerated when he started his YouTube channel, Dr. Nicholas Bate, on November 11, 2009. He also had another account he called Constant Butts, but for reasons we'll get into much later, it was taken down. Already he had a Twitter account, but like I mentioned earlier, it no longer exists. The archived version still exists, showcasing his use of Anna's surname and a rather unsettling profile description. I have symptoms similar to autism and say stuff I shouldn't, working on this I also love this one girl, and am on a quest for reciprocation. Before it was pulled down, Twitter was where Nick was sharing all sorts of bothersome and unnecessary information. However, at this time, YouTube was on the verge of becoming his dumping ground for more sucky content. This time, videos of his face were all over. Here's the thing, however. Days after opening his YouTube channel, Nick didn't upload any videos. Instead, on November 20th, 2009, he posted a live journal titled Drama on DA, where he stated that he was starting a blog specifically to focus on Anna. Bear in mind that it has been over a year now since Anna blocked him on all accounts. The journal entry revolved around some similar unknown lowlife named Caleb trash-talking Anna. He basically glazed Nick, making him the star of the show while suggesting that Anna was on the losing side for blocking him. He also called her fat and disgusting, arguing that Nick completes her. Nick and Anna's friend Kate jumped in to defend her. It wasn't anything dramatic or particularly interesting, just your run-of-the-mill DeviantArt beef. What was wild, though, was that Nick had created the entire blog in the first place. Talk about misplaced energy. Throughout 2009 and 2010, Nick continued to write journal entries about Anna. He tagged one, The Legend of Anna. In one entry under this blog, Nick expressed his desire to have a girlfriend until Anna could reciprocate his feelings. Sometimes I wish I could have, like, temporary girlfriend, just until Anna loves me. Other entries were technically similar. Nick spoke about Anna constantly, expressing his desperate need for her. Anna's the one thing I really, truly need. It got to a point where he started having sick daydreams about an alternate universe where he and Anna grew up together. Anna and I will be able to grow up together in real life, and by hanging out with me in real life, she'll actually get to know me, unlike how the past 5 years of internet-only friendship went down. Then she'll realize I'm not a stalker and will fall in love with me. Reading these entries is like watching someone trying to resurrect a dead relationship that never existed in the first place. In the midst of this weird obsession, Nick finally uploaded his first video on YouTube. This was on February 14th, 2010.
Hey, okay, is it recording? Yeah, it's recording. Hey, this is Nick Bate, and I'm going to give you a video tour of my room.
It was titled A Video Tour of My Room, with Nick showcasing his room and what could only be a shrine of his obsessions.
There's the wall of Anna. Sometimes I put other things on it. Right now I have drawings of the Coffee Crew characters. Probably can't see it because it's really not.
Apart from the wall of Anna, Nick revealed a binder filled with letters that Anna had sent him while they were still friends.
This has letters that Anna sent me in the mail and stuff, and then envelopes that they came in. Yeah, there's a Lincoln CD.
Mind you, he brought this folder out of his backpack, and he always took this backpack to his dad's house. This meant that Anna's letters stuck with him even in times that they were not particularly relevant. This was creepy on so many levels. The video continues with Nick breathing funny while talking about different things he inserts in his butt.
There's a toilet. There's a plunger that I use as a butt plug. There's a mirror. This is usually where I take pictures of myself. Here's some baby oil that I use as a lube for jacking off with, or for putting things in my butt.
Basically, Nick's videos were a perfect compilation of everything wrong with him. They were poorly made, disturbing, and revealed way too much about his twisted psychology. His early videos included dental horror shows, and rambling monologues about how he wanted to flog.
Had an idea to like do some video blogging type stuff.
In one particularly telling video from March 2010, Nick described his daily life.
Pretty much just my entire life is like just kind of hanging out in my room, waiting for internet access, or waiting for, my wife to marry me.
Note that he was referring to Anna as his wife, even though she had blocked him on every platform and wanted nothing to do with him. This level of delusion is frightening because it shows someone who has completely lost touch with reality. Nick had essentially created an alternate version of events where the person he was stalking was actually his romantic partner. Anyway, his story picks up in 2010, when Nick had some issues with his family. We get some insight into Nick's living situation. He's apparently fixing apartments for his aunt. Not exactly a career path, but something. And he was getting paid for it. That's really embarrassing, honestly. However, it's not as shameful as this next part. By June 2010, after nearly 2 years of Anna maintaining no contact, Nick decides to reach out via text. He titled the blog post, "The SMS Titanic," which is quite fitting considering the message would end up pretty close to the MS Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. His message is painfully awkward, rambling about new bands he's listening to, Pokemon, and how he's less annoying now. However, Anna did not respond. Instead, one of her friends, going by Miles Edgeworth online, stepped in with a clear message. "Never, I repeat, never," text Anna again. The rest is too colorful to read out, but you get the message. Sadly, Nick didn't. What followed was a conversation that perfectly illustrated Nick's complete inability to understand boundaries. Miles explained that Anna didn't want contact, that Nick creeped her out, and that he violated her privacy by posting about her online. Nick's response? He insisted that people can change their minds and that Anna will eventually realize she loves him. "She will not love you." "Sure she will." The conversation is frustrating to read because Miles is being completely clear that Anna hated Nick, and nothing would change that. But Nick refused to accept this reality. Fortunately, there was a rest period, or at least it seemed like it. In August 2010, Nick's life took a turn when he started playing Pokemon with someone named Maddie. The next day, he posted a journal titled, "I have a girlfriend now." Finally, he had someone in his life. But here's the thing about Maddie. She wasn't really his girlfriend. The Lolcow wiki states that by most accounts, she was either dating him or actively trolling him. This would become clear in the role she played when Nick's disgusting deeds were exposed in the following year. Still on his YouTube channel, September 7th, weeks after his 19th birthday, Nick posted what became his most viewed video. It was a role-play session with his half-sister involving toy swords or sticks. The description mentioned yet another unprovoked insult directed at their mother. It read, "I LARP with my half-sister, just days before our sticks were tragically stolen from us by our douchebag mom because I'm too old to be playing with sticks. Dumb bitch." The video has close to 70,000 views and quite a number of likes. However, it did not give him any publicity at all. Nick Bates was still a young guy who shamelessly stank his own small corner of the internet. Moving on, between September and October, Nick's relationship with his family was deteriorating. His father tells him he'll be homeless because he makes everyone miserable. I don't know what's been up with Dad Ladle, but suddenly he's mad at me for a bunch of unknown reasons. Right now, he's literally doing some kind of rant that I'm not really listening to, but I'm pretty sure he's telling me I'm going to be homeless and that I'm making everyone miserable or something. Honestly, based on what we know, Dad wasn't wrong. Nick was the biggest bum of the century. He wasn't earning money and was constantly hogging his computer. At one point, his dad put a limit on his internet usage. This speaks volumes, considering he was a grown teenager fully capable of getting a job. To make matters worse, Nick didn't channel his irrelevancy into job hunts. Instead, he ventured into a music career from hell. Remember his second YouTube channel, Constant Butts? This was where he uploaded videos of his musical explorations. His songs, if you can call them that, consisted of him screeching out-of-tune lyrics about having with children, eating feces, and performing acts so grotesque I can't even repeat them without risking my sanity. The Encyclopedia Dramatica defined Nick the musician as tone-deaf, and a very impressionable fellow who was desperate to be accepted by everyone around him. His hit tracks included titles like Children, Everybody's Pooping Except for You, and Things I Want to Do to Anna's Butt. It was the soundtrack of madness, renditions, more like confessions, of his deepest desires to have with underage kids and Anna. And Nick put it all out there himself, even going so far as to post it on his Twitter. At this point, we can't say for sure if Nick understands the concept of shame. Sadly, the embarrassment didn't end there, I'm afraid. Nick continued to write about how they couldn't leave him to do other important stuff in his computer. It's a complete demented talk from here on out. I mean, it was bad enough they keep making me do chores and kicking me off the computer when I'm in the middle of something important, but then they tell me I have a 2-hour limit. You gotta laugh at the idiocy. Well, eventually, Nick got kicked out and wasn't allowed to return until he got a job. Dad decided to wake me up and tell me I can't come back until I get a job. I don't know what brought this up again, but yeah, I don't know how many times I have to tell everyone I can't work, but nobody ever shuts up about it. It's really annoying. For From the looks of it, this was an immediate problem for Nick, possibly even one of the most frustrating aspects of his existence. Unfortunately, it was only the beginning of more trouble. Trouble that would change his life for good. In May 2011, Nick was outed to the wider internet. His disgusting tales reached the forefront of 789chan, an old image board where a host of internet users converged to discuss problematic individuals and try to appear important. The website no longer functions right now, but details about Nick's internet persecution were preserved in an archive which we'll look at now. The exact circumstances remain murky. Some say he stumbled onto an image board dedicated to mocking Christian, thinking he could relate. Others claim that Maddie, who is now his ex-girlfriend, had dumped his private logs there to expose him. Either way, what happened next would cement Nick's place in online infamy forever. The floodgates opened. People dug into his DeviantArt, his YouTube channels, his bizarre music about with children, and worst of all, his endless confessionals about stalking women, obsessing over Anna, and indulging in disturbing fetishes that I can only describe as inhuman. By the end of the month, a body of material was online. Journals, messages, transcripts, and videos. And the internet did what it does best. It fed. They were not about to crucify some cringe lord with bad hygiene and anime obsessions. No, Nick was something darker. Nick was on 789chan watching as thousands of strangers on the internet insulted him. Instead of seeing reason in their criticisms or leaving the platform altogether, Nick did the most insane thing. He tried to defend himself. First of all, he started on a calm note with a feel free to ask questions attitude. Guys, it's me. I just confirm on Twitter in a sec. I'm about to be kicked off the computer though, but I'll be back once Dad's girlfriend is done so I can try and present my side of the story. Go ahead and ask or whatever, I'll get to it then. Just imagine the sheer audacity of this guy. It was almost as if he actually believed he was a celebrity. Now this was where things got pretty heavy. There was a truckload of accusations levied against Nick, some of which were backed by quotations of his tweets. Things like his habit of stalking, his love for butts, hate for vaginas, smearing poop on the walls, not keeping proper hygiene. Basically everything we've known about him so far. However, at the top of the list was perhaps Nick's most horrific deed, the chat log with Anna. Remember this very repulsive conversation Nick had with Anna? This was when it leaked. No one knew exactly when this happened, but it was now on the internet, adding to Nick's infamous status. When confronted with accusations of molesting his underage half-sister, Nick denied it, but not in the way an innocent person would. Nick claimed that his admissions in the leaked chats were made up to sound cool to his friends. I made that shit a booter up for my friends because one liked to sound more up than I really am. Not for attention, as most of you are saying, it's just kind of this shtick I do for my friends. I never intended for it to get out to other people. Throughout the thread, he kept repeating that he did not do it, and that he only said it because stupid things were cool to him. As for the molestation thing, in retrospect I realize that's not so much stupid as I don't know what, but yeah, not sure why I said that. I don't really think before I do. And he didn't lie with that last statement. For someone with a substantial level of internet awareness, Nick had left footprints that could not easily fade away with his denial, but he insisted regardless, without a shred of remorse. Why should I be worried? I know I didn't do anything wrong. Ironically, when he engaged with his online critics, Nick's explanations were somehow more disturbing than staying silent would have been. After trying to laugh the whole accusation off, Nick suddenly did something extremely stupid. When confronted about his other interests, he readily admitted that he was a Even worse, he claimed it wasn't illegal. I am a But that's not illegal as long as you don't actually do any children, and that's sad, truly. And that's not all. In one of his most notorious defenses, Nick argued that children can consent. In his words, children would be able to consent if people would educate them about. Even worse, Nick argued that people who disagreed were enabling ageism. According to the dictionary, ageism is prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of a person's age. That's right. Nick was actively arguing that not ascribing to his belief that children could consent was prejudice. It's not the saying I'm wrong that makes them bigots, it's the saying children aren't as developed as adults. That's ageism. After saying that, Nick made another insane argument that even if not all children could consent, some could. You can't base a fact around an entire group. That's called bigotry. Every individual is different, so while I'm sure some children can't give consent, others are totally capable of it. We'll stop here for now. You can have an idea what other kind of excuses Nick could think of on the spot, just to push his disgusting narrative. Honestly, the thought of a human being having these kinds of thoughts really makes you wonder what goes through a person's mind. Nick was simply one of those people who had to be locked away from society. For good. The forum persecution moved on to another pressing concern. Nick's optimistic stance on the KKK and Nazis. Nick's response? If you thought he denied it like his half-sister's case, then you couldn't be more wrong. Nick came up with the most racist, insensitive, and honestly speaking dumb response. The KKK claims that black people being evil is fact too, and the Nazis said the same about Jews. Hitler even proved it by explaining evolution or something. But it's not fact, it's still just racism. What he was more or less saying was that the KKK was a righteous racist clan, and Hitler proved that Jews were evil. Even if his last statement sounded a bit contradictory, this was the message he was typing across. Just when you think you've seen enough of this guy's clownery, another gut-wrenching statement pops up on the internet. It's truly baffling. Regarding his Nazi comment, Nick gave yet another absurd answer. Okay, the Nazi thing came at a time when I was obsessed with this other girl who was doing a series parodying Nazis. Obviously, the Holocaust was bad. I just like the idea of a group of people with matching uniforms and all doing the same. Nick's poor attempt at excusing his behavior was him disclosing a uniform fetish in an effort to impress the girl he liked at the time. The internet wasn't laughing anymore. They had seen enough to be horrified. Nick Bates, who was once a private worm, had truly become public fodder overnight. As if the chat logs weren't bad enough, around the same time period, Nick participated in a Skype call where he actively defended and argued for its legalization. A recording of this call was also released in 2011, and it's absolutely chilling to listen to.
You said that nothing is wrong with pedophilia. Did you say that? Yeah, you did.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Pedophilia should not be illegal. It's a stupid law. I just approve of pedophilia.
And as if his statement wasn't enough, Nick proceeded to share his views on the 789chan forum. Here's what he had to say on the topic. Okay, obviously is bad. I'm not saying legalize. I'm saying legalize consensual. Nick argued with the casual confidence of someone who genuinely believed he was making reasonable points, completely oblivious to how monstrous his positions are. He was talking nonsense about anything and everything. In one instance, he even went on a long ramble, king, about why he couldn't work or earn money. Yes, he was defending his laziness and sense of worthlessness. Nick's excuse was that he had a mental problem. In his words, I can't get a job because of whatever the mental illness is. Well, frankly speaking, Nick wasn't 100% in his head. All his obsessions wouldn't place him amongst other respectable people of society, if you get what I mean. So Nick didn't specify what kind of illness he has, but he said the most absurd thing you'd ever hear. Whatever I have is much worse than Down syndrome. Can you imagine that? What kind of person would think of such a thing and assume it's a justifiable point? Well, as you guessed it, the reactions to that statement was immediate. You gotta wonder where exactly humanity went wrong to have someone like Nick Bates as a walking punishment. After comparing his repulsive self to an actual serious mental spectrum, Nick told the people of the internet that he couldn't work because he hated being around people. The classic excuse. Nick had now become popular for all the wrong reasons. His case were too disturbing and too extreme that you would want to believe it was an elaborate trolling, but it wasn't. This was a real grown-up with a compound of problems. When the online persecution became too much, Nick stopped responding. Instead, he took to his new account on DeviantArt under the username Nick Bates. There, Nick shared a piece of write-up called Explanation, like 5. It was a journal where he basically claimed someone had hijacked his old account before he went on to talk about the developments surrounding his case. It read, Sup, my old account was Haguramon, but lately a bunch of jerk shantards have been hijacking all my accounts and changing the passwords. It's a long story, but basically they think I'm a Lolcow just because I have a bunch of weird fetishes and I'm all nerdy and stuff. And there's a bunch of threads about me on an image board, and posters have been trying to get me arrested for molesting my half-sister, even though I can prove that one didn't, but of course they don't listen to a word I say. It's also been floating around that I'm stalling someone, but that's not true either. The real story is that I met this girl Anna back in 2005, fell in love with her, and then on August 23rd, 2008, she randomly decided to start hating me, and told all her friends I'm creepy, a stalker, an idiot, etc. So now tons of people on the internet hate me, so that's nice. It'll probably be a while until I post any art or anything. I lack a scanner. The lack of awareness in his tone is indeed staggering. It was clear that Nick had been so lost in his own bubble that he did not realize or understand what the critics were saying about him. Anyway, moving on, Nick's online activity did reduce dramatically after this point. However, he returned on July 21st with a shocking twist. And before you ask, no, he was not a changed person. He was much worse. After weeks of hiatus, Nick posted a blog explaining that he had written 3 entries about his time off. It read, Sup gays. So, okay, I typed up 3 different LJ entry drafts during the month I've been offline. I'm gonna post them all in a 3-part series entitled Stuff That Happened During the Month I've Been Online, the Trilogy. Part 1, Home Life. Part 2, More Emo Whining. Part 3, Join Us Review. Aside from the fact that this introduction sounded too self-absorbed for someone with an online hit mark on his head, it appeared Nick had fully embraced his disgusting self. There was a bit of transformation. He had changed from the liar who denied the allegations against him to a reviling person who now accepted that he posted disturbing things. Speaking of disturbing things, let's take a look at the highlight of his first entry. Nick started off by talking about the birthday celebrations that happened around the house and even Independence Day. Then he quickly spiraled into an unsettling revelation about what he had done with a flashlight. Brace yourself. for you about to be the first person in your bloodline to read these things," Nick said. And I quote, "Okay, this is the disturbing. Here we go. I got my little flashlight thing stuck up my butt. Normally I leave the tip sticking out so I can grab it and pull it out when I'm done. But on this particular occasion, I forgot it was in there. I clenched and accidentally sucked it the whole way up. I tried to get it out for about an hour. That one's kind of confusing to no avail. So I had to call Joyce. She came over and got it out for me. Then she took it from me. So now I have no idea what to use as a butt plug. It would be really great if I had a real one." What a bad day to have comprehension skills. As for the rest of the journal, which was terribly lengthy for some reason, Nick continued to ramble on about the disturbing things he did over the break. Of course, Anna is mentioned a few times, but he kept things PG for once. If there's something to take home from this period, it's that Nick had not learned his lesson. There was no act of self-reflection, and no social media sensitization. Nick had returned to the internet as a more self-aware beast. And it does raise the question about the sort of parenting going on around the house. But on a much lighter note, Nick's day of reckoning was around the corner. By 2013, Nick's case blew up on the popular local forum called Kiwi Farms, when a thread was created specially for him. Nick Bates/Nicholas B. Stautzenberger. People who had never heard the name Nick Bates from the 2011 thread on 789chan were shoved into multiple eye-opening screenshots about the guy. At the forefront of the hate train was none other than Maddie, his ex-girlfriend. The minute she hopped on the thread, she posted long basically explaining her relationship with Nick and how she only dated him out of pity. Anna joined the thread as well, and both ladies quickly. Maddie shared screenshots of some of the most disturbing conversations she had with Nick from 2012. At this point, they were no longer in a relationship, yet Nick kept sending unhinged texts to her about, "You know it, Butts and Anna." Here's a prime example. In this conversation, Nick said, "Dude, I love my Anna Nichols so much. I'm going to take care of her and treat her real nice and make love to her butt every day." And after that, it was just a series of disgusting content one after the other. You can just tell that this guy was not a human being by how he constantly sent these text messages, despite Maddie's obvious frustration and discomfort. Maddie kept adding fuel to fire with her revelations. Each time she made him out to a bigger asshole. It didn't matter how great or small the details were, she just kept telling everyone how repulsive Nick truly was. In one post she made, Maddie claimed that Nick had into a cookie batter that he eventually fed his family. Like the 789chan forum, people on Kiwi Farms were thoroughly disgusted by Nick. Comments about his previous statements were posted in their numbers. This user, who the makes up a story about child molestation if they didn't do it? Why would you fictionalize victimizing a child? Well, folks, the answer to this question might never be found on this thread, or in any place for that matter. Moving forward, another user made a comment, which I agree with 100%, and it reads, "I am surprised Nick never got beat up." From then on, the thread continued to share Nick's story to create awareness. Eventually, it got to the point where Nick's parents were involved and repercussions were met. Nick was put in, according to this blog entry in 2013, but it was definitely not the right way to go, especially with all the amount of criminal indicators stacked on Nick's plate. His talk was all over forums on the internet. Even while he wasn't online as much, internet users were working overtime to get him out of society. By March 2015, Nick had become notorious enough to warrant his own Encyclopedia Dramatica page, a parody wiki that documents internet personalities. The entry was characteristically crude, but documented many of the most disturbing aspects of his online presence. The existence of this page marked Nick's transition from a private individual with problems to a public figure known for all the wrong reasons. Nick was now a widely known name, and this publicity attracted law enforcement authorities. Investigations began swiftly. After much silence on the progress of the investigation, Nick suddenly tweeted news on April 11th that were more or less good news for the people of the internet. He said, "What the hell? I got a copy of the report about me and it says I've been telling people I did it. Have they even been paying attention? It also says we performed analingus on each other, which A, I only perform, not receive, and B, I didn't even perform." For context, as this user put it, Nick had been identified as an person, and Child Protective Services were involved. Nick as the AP person, and lists CPS actions being taken. This development meant one thing: Nick was in trouble. As one would expect, users on Kiwi were overjoyed by the news. The comments, hilarious and completely fitting. "The end is nigh, and it is glorious. Take him away, boys. Please let this sick rot in jail. If any Lolcow needs to be behind bars, it's Nick." From all that we've discussed till this point, it only made sense to be excited over this type of change. Nick was unapologetically vile, and he had no place in society. In fact, he had no place in his home, with a younger half-sister around. So it was quite understandable that people were happy. Later in April, Nick's online presence had stopped. It was later discovered that he was arrested. His charges? Deviate intercourse with a and indecent. Somehow Nick might have been a prophet, because 4 years before his arrest, he had tweeted his desire to be known as. It read, "I want to be involved in a tabloid scandal someday." Nick Bate. Shocker? I don't know. Something like that. Well, he got his wish, with a massive audience for that matter. By May 13th, news of his arrest was massively spreading around Pennsylvania. That same day, people on Kiwi Farms were immediately and actively following the case. Everyone was praying that Nick would finally get to the place where he belonged. They were discussing the possible food options Nick would have to eat once he arrived in prison, and theorizing recipes of Nutriloaf, a popular prison food suitable for Nick, or Sick Nick as they called him. The reception was massive. For years they documented Nick's gross behavior. You all should be ashamed, but you have no shame. And here's another one. I hope Nick sues the out of everyone involved when he is found innocent. This just goes to show you scary humanity can be. Even with all the mounting evidence, there were people who still believed Nick Bates was deserving of this kind of support. When on end, we had users upset about the castle-like prison Nick was about to enter. That place looks like a castle. Nick belongs in the dirtiest, most confined pit for all eternity, and I'm only half exaggerating there. This set of people on the other end believed in his innocence. Who knows what other kind of humans live amongst us? Moving on, Nick's arrest was only the beginning. His case would drag on for months, and Kiwi Farms, as we've come to know it, wasn't content to sit on the sidelines. Some users showed keen interest in attending the hearing, but it was one of the site's most infamous users, Saul Goodman, that ultimately got involved. Saul Goodman wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't even a journalist. He was just a Kiwi Farms user with a car, a camera, and the desire to get a good story. When Nick's preliminary hearing came up, Saul made the drive through rural Pennsylvania to the tiny magistrate's office, a glorified trailer in the middle of nowhere. I called ahead and confirmed that the hearing is going ahead as scheduled. This time, coming from at Mrs. Goodman's place, the drive took me through miles of nothing but cornfields and cow pastures. Despite some heavy rain, I got here before Nick, so I will have pictures of both him and the party van when it arrives. Stay tuned. And there, he struck gold. Saul snapped the first public photo of Nick since his arrest. Verse 1. Nick resembled a scraggly, overweight man in an orange jumpsuit as he was led into court by officers. For the internet, it was the first real proof that Nick wasn't just some phantom. He was flesh and blood, and he looked every bit as pathetic as they imagined. This user commented, "Happiest picture of the year, folks. Enjoy it like you would a scarlet sunset." And then he dropped what would become one of the most infamous courtroom reports in Lolcow history. Inside the courtroom, Saul described the surreal scene. Nick's mom, aunt, and Ao's family were all present. A quick note. A's O, or A, are initials used in place of Nick's sister's actual name. Back to the story, something unusual happened. Nick's half-sister, Ao, the victim herself, was called to testify at the preliminary stage. Apparently, the defense is going to make A testify at a preliminary hearing, so A's dad is off to get her. Normally, courts try to spare kids that trauma until trial, but Nick's defense forced it early. Upon hearing the news, Kiwi users were not pleased. I feel sorry for A having to see him in person again. How big is this courtroom anyways? Sadly, it was a necessary evil to grant her the justice she deserved. Saul's media report didn't stop with photos. At the end of the hearing, he filmed Nick trudging back into the van, capturing every awkward, defeated step. Shortly after, a new update arrived. Nick's case was going to trial in a full court. As always, Saul Goodman was referenced to be the board's media house. The users on Kiwi were over the roof. Not only did this mean that Nick would remain in detention, it also meant a brutal trial awaited him. Later that year, on Nick's birthday, when it became clear he'd spend it in jail, the site plastered a mocking banner. Reminder, Nick Bate is still in jail. Happy birthday, LOL. After a prolonged trial, the sentencing schedule was finally released in 2016. Kiwi users waited with bated breaths for the results. Then on April 26th, the news of a lifetime came from one of the forum's leading users, Anonymous. I just got off the phone with the clerk of courts for Lancaster County. Nick was sentenced to 40 years, the maximum for his crime, and is eligible for parole in 16.5 years. Pop the bubbly. And with that, the notorious person called Nick Bate ceased to exist with society. Nick Bate wasn't some isolated freak. He wasn't the one weird guy that slipped through the cracks. The truth is, there are more people like Nick out there, hiding in plain sight, lurking in forums, using the internet as both their mask and their megaphone. Here's a prime example. In a screenshot shared on the forum, a user shared a screenshot from another forum. In this screenshot, someone suspected to be Nick had shared their desire to drug their teen cousins so they could essentially them. Due to the similar pattern of degeneracy, the user suspected this was Nick who had been released on bail before his main trial, but one other Kiwi user quickly clarified that it was highly unlikely this was Nick. Can't be him. Nick getting bailed out quietly and then going to an image board where he managed to type normally, and living in a household with kids? Nah, Nick would rate or go hide in dark corner and try to pretend this isn't happening. In any case, the chain of events only points to one fact. There are a lot of sick people out there. Nick only represents one of the many scapegoats. For years, Nick got away with it. He convinced himself nobody was paying attention, that the things he bragged about online would never catch up to him, but he was wrong. The internet noticed, and in a strange, almost poetic twist, it was the combined effort of strangers, Lolcow hunters, forum posters, amateur reporters like Saul, and even the very people Nick tried to impress, that exposed him for what he really was. That's the lesson here. Justice isn't always clean. It doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it starts with people refusing to ignore the red flags, documenting the warnings, and refusing to let a predator slip back into obscurity. Nick's downfall proves that with enough persistence, enough pressure, and enough eyes on the truth, even the most disturbing figures can be dragged into the light, because while there may be more sick Nicks out there, they can't all hide forever. And when they finally reveal themselves, when they finally show who they are, it's up to all of us to make sure they face the consequences. Nick did, and now he'll be spending the rest of his life behind bars. What do you think of Nick Bates' story? Is he the most insane person you've ever heard of on the internet? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.